Today, our second reading. If you were following along in a missalette, you'll see that our second reading has a long version and a short version. This reading is a lot of times picked. It's Ephesians 5. It's God talking about husbands and wives and how to love one another. There's an option for weddings to be able to choose this reading. And again, they give you a long version and a short version. And 99.9% of the time, brides pick the short version. And the reason why is because the short version cuts the first 4 or 5 verses off. So we're going to read them and lean into it tonight. So, if you were listening, you'll hear. Brothers and sisters, be subordinate to one another out of reverence for Christ. That sounds sweet. That sounds so good, right? And then it turns and it says, wives should be subordinate to their husbands. And we wonder why brides pick the short version, right? For the husband is the head of his wife, just as Christ is the head of the church. He himself the Savior of the body. As the church is subordinate to Christ, so wives should be subordinate to their husbands in everything. Now, whenever these verses are read on Sundays, I have fun because I do my best to kind of look out into the congregation and see what guys are doing this move to their wives. You got to listen to me, right? And when they do that, I particularly enjoy, like yesterday at 5 o'clock Mass, there was a certain somebody that I love dearly, great family, know them very, very well. Their son may or may not serve all of our daily Masses. But anyway, they were sitting right about here, and when I saw it, I could see my boy go, And then I heard last night while the dog was barking that he was actually outside sleeping with the dog. But the reason why I say that, it's always interesting because whenever that little joke, my dad does this all the time when this reading comes up, pick on my mom and gotta listen to me. The best part about it though is that when that happens, guys, we miss our homework. We miss the next phrase, we miss the next thing because what we're doing is we're sitting there going, hey, you gotta listen to me, right? This is what comes next. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over to the church in splendor, handed himself over, cleansing her by the bath of the water and the word, that he might present to himself the church in splendor without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Ladies, all you have to do is say, I'm going to listen and follow my husband. But husbands, you have to love according to the way that Christ loved the church. Think about that. How does Christ love the church? Anytime you go to a Catholic church, you see a crucifix. There's your homework, fellas. It's interesting because I think what happens is that sometimes we can kind of get into this competition between the sexes, competition between man and woman, right? When in reality, there's a lot that has to die in marriage. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually going to a wedding for a former student in Lake Charles. And when I was getting ready and getting all my stuff together, I had a wedding on Friday night and a funeral on Saturday morning. So I go into the office, I'm getting all my paperwork together. I have a pile of stuff to grab for Friday. I have a pile of stuff to grab for Saturday morning. So when I'm walking out, I looked at Ms. Brandy and I was like, see you later. I'm on my way out. I said, I'm heading to the funeral. And as I walked out the door, her eyes got about 10 sizes too big. And she's like, wait, what? You grabbed the wrong pot? Are you going to a funeral? I was like, no, I meant wedding, right? So I kind of misspoke. But as I got to the wedding, I started thinking about it more and more, that when we go to a wedding, what we're actually celebrating is a death. We're celebrating a death of a former way of life. We're celebrating a death of a bachelor and a death of a bachelorette. The reason why I say that, and it's so important, because the wedding day is a no to everything that I have been, a no to anything that I want, but a yes to you and a yes to God. We say a big yes on a wedding day. A massive yes, a public yes on a wedding day, both husband and wife. And we're saying yes, right, as our second reading talks about, that we're going to put aside myself for the sake of another. It's interesting, Pope Benedict actually talks about something similar when he's talking about vocations to the priesthood, that he says the yes of ordination is lived out in little yeses of everyday life, right? The yes of a wedding is lived out in the little yeses of a marriage. I know on June 3rd, 2017, at St. Joseph Co-Cathedral, I said yes with my entire life that I was going to live and do as a priest. And every day since has been I have to make the conscious decision that I'm going to be a priest today. I'm going to live out my priesthood today. I'm going to live like Jesus wants me to live today. It was a question that was once asked an old priest, said, when did you know that you wanted to be a priest? He said, this morning when I was shaving. He decided that morning that he was going to be a priest today. Marriage vows are lived out the same way. That yes, this morning when I woke up, that I'm going to live my life in a sacrificial way for the sake of another. That there is a big yes that then has to be lived out in the commitment of a bunch of little yeses. I point that out because it's not only a vocational thing. Married, priesthood, religious life, it's not only in the world of vocation that we see this important kind of element of a big yes being proclaimed and then the little yeses having to follow. It's also in just the decision to be Christian. Like to say that I'm going to follow Jesus Christ, I'm going to give my life over to Jesus Christ, that the gospel when presented to me, like absolutely I believe it and yes, I want to live it, right? We can have kind of these big public moments. We can have these kind of big mountaintop moments where we might feel and know that we're close to God, but without living it, like without the little yeses that follow, the big yes is hollow. It's empty. It's pointless. I think back whenever I was in high school, college, and I'd go to retreats. Whether it be like awakening type retreats, or whether it be like Steubenville type retreats, or Seek retreats, or any of these kind of things, like these big kind of retreats, these big kind of moments where we go through and all these kind of things, and we're tired, and we're focused on the Lord, and the Lord's working, and we know that God's real, and people are giving talks that are they're really engaging and really just like speaking to me, and I'm in a crowd of people, but I think the person is actually talking and saying my story. Like when I know that God is real, and there's a moment in prayer or in adoration or in confession that I sit down and I go, you know what? Yes, God, I believe you. I want to follow you. Whatever you got for me, I'm ready to do. Let's go. I'm in. I'm all in. Great. What happens is that the yes of that moment has to then be lived out on Monday. And if it's not, that moment becomes a flash in the pan. A nice idea, a good memory, maybe some new Facebook friends, MySpace friends when I was old, you know. You don't even know what that is. But like it becomes like this movement that was nice and great and wonderful and then didn't change anything. Because if I only live out the yes of the wedding and not the little yeses of the marriage, then it becomes useless. The interesting thing is that in today's readings, in both our first reading and in our gospel, there are very, very explicit moments that are presented to the followers of Jesus, to the followers of God. In the Old Testament, right, the followers of Yahweh, the Israelites, what they do is in the book of Joshua, they find themselves in just kind of in a Gentile area. They find themselves outside of the promised land. They're following Joshua, right? They're listening to him. And Joshua presents to them a very, very clear decision. He says, you can follow the God who has led us, the God of our forefathers, the God that has fed us through the desert, right? You could follow the same God who has been there for us and with us, or you can choose to follow the gods of the Amorites, this Gentile people who have a bunch of fake little g gods that they keep sacrificing to. You can decide. You get to pick who you want to follow. The real Yahweh God or the little g idol God. It's your decision. And then he says, but for me and my household, we will follow the Lord. We will follow Yahweh. We will follow the God who has proved himself over and over and over again. Jesus does something very, very similar in today's gospel. Right? The last few weeks we've heard about the bread of life discourse. We've heard the bread of life discourse. John 6, all through John 6, what happens is that Jesus multiplies the loaves and the fish, and then he walks on water, which is kind of like the meat in the bread of life sandwich, right? And then what happens is that he comes back and he starts talking to the people, and they're hungry. They just like saw the miracle. They want to know, like, can you feed us some more? And he says, I'm going to give you better bread. I'm going to give you miraculous bread. Your ancestors ate manna in the desert that came down on a daily basis, that satiated a hunger of the flesh. But I'm going to give you a bread that's bigger, that's better, that's still miraculous, and still is going to come down every day for you, but it's going to be the bread of life, the bread of my flesh. And he goes into saying this, and he says, my flesh is true food, my blood is true drink. Eat my flesh and drink my blood. And when he says those words, people look at him and go, this guy is insane. This guy is nuts. Because the word he's using for eat is not like a spiritual thing. He's saying, chew on me. That's weird. Sorry. And it leads to today's gospel, where at the very, very beginning of today's gospel, the people are murmuring amongst themselves, and they're going, this is really hard to hear. Like, we can translate it into our words. He's freaking crazy, right? And Jesus looks at him and says, like he's telling them today, I mean what I say. And some people won't be able to accept it. And some will. And he looks at him today and he says, make your decision. Make your choice. John 6, verse 66. If you ever want to look it up, 666. What we hear is that many went back to their former way of life and stop following him. Now, first of all, this is a moment where we know that Jesus is being literal. That he's saying, eat my flesh, drink my blood. He's going to make a way for us to do it. He's going to have the Last Supper and offer the sacrifice of the Passover and make himself sit in the place of the lamb. He is the lamb. He is the priest. All those good things. We talked about all that last Lent, right? But what he's getting at is he's saying, very, very clearly, like, he's not being figurative, he's being literal, because if he's being literal, we know he's being literal because when people start to walk away, he doesn't look at him and say, wait, come see, come back. I was just being figurative. No. He lets them go. Because people can't accept the teaching. They don't know him well enough. They don't know that he is who he says he is. They can't accept this teaching. It's too hard. It's a little bit too crazy. And they walk. And then Jesus looks at his 12. And he says, what about you? Are you going to leave too? For Peter and the rest of the 12, rest of the apostles, he's sitting there and putting them on the spot and saying, make your choice. Do you want to follow me? Or do you want to go with them? Do you want to follow me? Or do you want to exit stage right? Get off the ride, whatever word you want to use. He's like, now's your time. Go. Peter responds with such a beautiful profession of faith. But how would you respond? If Jesus is looking at you saying, do you want to follow me? Do you want to say yes? But know that whenever you say yes, that big yes, that moment is going to mean a whole lot of little yeses, right? Whenever he looks at you, he says, do you want to say yes to me? Which means we're going to say yes to the suffering, and yes to the ostracizing, and yes to being firsthand miracles, and yes to me working in your life, and yes to heaven, and yes to the Eucharist. Do you want to say all the yeses? Or do you want to go? Just how would you respond? Peter gives a perfect expression where he says to him very, very clearly, we've come to believe you are who you say you are. Where else would we go? I think it's such a powerful moment for us. Because there's no desire to get off the ride. There's no desire to walk away, right? There's no desire to get out of relationship with the Lord. Peter has been convinced and knows who Jesus is, who he says he is. He's come to believe it, and he says, this is what I want to live for. That I want Jesus, my relationship with you to be the main focus of my life. When we're presented with the gospel, when we're presented with the Christian message, we're presented with the same decision. Lord, do I want to follow you? Yes. But am I willing to say all the little ones? Or, nah, put it off. C.S. Lewis once had a beautiful quote on this. He says, Christianity, if false, is of no importance. Like, think about that. Everything in the Bible, everything in the Christian belief, whether you're Catholic or some other, right? Like, everything Christian, if it is false, if Jesus Christ isn't who he says he is, if he's just a crazy man or a liar to us, like if Jesus Christ is something other than the Son of God, then everything that you and I are doing is completely a waste of time. If Jesus Christ is not the Son of God who came to earth, died for my sins, resurrected from the dead, and is now seated at the right hand of the Father, which we're going to say in a few minutes in the creed, if we don't believe that, then everything that we're doing is absolutely bull and a waste of time. We're playing dress up and yelling at the sky. Christianity, if false, is of no importance. He continues, Christianity, if false, is of no importance, and if true, is of infinite importance. If false, it is completely useless and there's no reason for us to be here. But if Christianity is true, then what we do on Sunday in church, what we do every day when we come to Mass, what we do when we go into an adoration chapel, when we bow our head to pray, when we put ourselves before God and recognize his presence in our life, it is the most important thing we can do because we're coming in touch with the God of the universe. The same God who created everything we see, the same God who has given me life, that same God wants an actual particular relationship with me and wants me in heaven with him for all eternity. If Christianity is false, it is a waste of time. But if it is true, it is the most important thing that we could possibly do. It is the most important place that we could possibly invest our time. It is the most important place that we could put our attention a hell of a lot more than YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or anywhere else. Those are nothing if Christianity is true. And Lewis continues. If false, it is of no importance. If true, of infinite importance. The only thing that it cannot be is moderately important. If Christianity is false, it doesn't go onto our priority list. If Christianity is true, it has to be the number one thing. The only thing it cannot be is number 4. Behind like my girlfriend, my grades, and like my dog. Can't rank there. It can't rank in the middle. I think for us as Christians, like one of the biggest scandals in the world that we can see in the Christian church, whether that be Catholic, whether it be Christian, whether it be non-denominational, whether it be Baptist, Methodist, all these different places, is watching Christians that say, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, I'm a disciple, I love the Lord, I constantly want to pray. And what happens is that the rank falls to like number 6, and I kind of care about Mass enough to go, but if I miss, I miss. Because the reality is, if Christianity is true, it's the most important thing we can do with our time. It's the most edifying place that we can put our focus. It's the best use of our time. But if it is false, it is useless. It is an extreme, and it requires extreme reaction. As we come to Mass, when we approach the Lord, right? This, like tonight, as we come to Mass, we have the opportunity. We have the same decision point that was offered to the Israelites by Joshua, the same decision point that was offered to the apostles by Jesus, that you and I have an opportunity to say, Lord, yeah, I want to follow you. I want to do what you're calling me to. I want to do everything that Father JD's screaming about for too long in his homily. I want to do everything that I've heard about. I want to say yes to you, God. And if you don't, we can say no. We have the freedom. But know that when we say yes, that is not a one-time thing. It's not an end-all, be-all. The yes of the wedding has to be lived out in the yes of the marriage. That you and I then, we have the commitment where, okay, I'm going to start doing the things that Christians do. I'm going to start making my life look like that of a Christian. That the most important thing in my life all of a sudden becomes when I pray. It becomes I'm going to uphold chastity with my girlfriend, with my boyfriend. I'm going to avoid pornography and masturbation. Like, I'm not going to let that be the thing that ruins and pulls me away out of relationship with God. Like, if Christianity is the most important thing, I'm going to start to change my life to do it. And to do it well. And to live in relationship with God. It can't rank fourth. As we come to Mass tonight, just a very simple question. Do you want to say yes? Do you want to say, yeah, Lord, I want you to be the center of my life. I want you to be the focal point. I want you to be the one that I pursue with all of my vigor and all of my energy and all excitement. I'll end with this. There was a priest, Father Pedro Arrupe, and you may have heard this story before. But Father Pedro Arrupe was the former head of the Jesuits, and he was giving a talk on a relationship with God and falling in love with God. So he gave a beautiful talk, and all these people were like excited. And the head of the Jesuits, like worldwide, was speaking, so like everybody was fired up. They hear this talk. Okay, a reporter. There was a question and answer kind of section, and a reporter asked the question to him. Said, "Father, thank you for the talk. Really appreciate it. But can you give us something practical? Just something practical." And he kind of sat back and he waited for a second. He looked at the reporter and he said, his response was, "Nothing is more practical than finding God, than falling in love in a quite absolute and final way. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination, will decide everything. It will get you out of bed in the morning. It will determine what you do with your evenings, who you know, what you read, how you spend your weekends." And then he ended it by saying, fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. When it comes to falling in love, do we, like Peter, believe in Jesus? Believe he is who he says he is? And it might sound like an elementary question, but do we love him? Do we respond to the love of God? God has loved us first, and we love him back. Do you love him? Second question, are you willing to do the things to stay in love, to stay in relationship, to not allow the other, like the temptations of the world, temptations of everything else, to pull at our relationship with God and pull us out? Do you want to stay there? Tonight's a good start. You're here. And we have an opportunity when we come to communion, when we come to the Lord, to say yes, a big yes, to God. But that big yes then must lead us to living out the marriage, to living out with the little yeses of daily life. And today we respond with a big yes and carry it with us as we go forth.